Hello and welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to learn about the concept of bondage and liberation in Samkhya philosophy. Samkhya holds that this world is full of sorrows and sufferings. Wherever there are gunas, there are pains. Even the so-called pleasures leads to pain. So wherever there is guna, wherever there is an imbalance of gunas, there will be pleasure or pain associated with it. And even the so-called the gunas of pleasure or even the so-called pleasures lead to pain. So pain is inevitable, suffering is inevitable. They're not denying that you can eradicate pain. They're saying that they're accepting that wherever there are gunas, there are pains. According to Sankhya, there are three kinds of pain. The first one is adhyatmic, due to the intraorganic psychophysical causes. Example, the bodily disorders, the mental affections, attachments. So these are the adhyatmic kind of pains because of the intraorganic psychosocial, psychophysical causes. The next is the adibhotic, which are due to the extraorganic natural causes. For example, the attack of the beast, thorns, etc. So attack of dogs, all kinds of that are the adibhotic pain, which are due to the extraorganic but natural causes. The next is the adidevic pains, which are due to the supernatural causes. For example, pain inflicted by ghosts and demons. So this is like this can be said to be very superstitious, but this is what Sankhya philosophy has told us that there are three kinds of pains which are associated with the gunas. The first is the adhyatmic pain, which are due to the uh, intraorganic psychophysical causes, for example, the bodily disorders, body pains, and the mental affections. The next is the adibiotic pains, which is due to the extraorganic natural causes, for example, the attack of beast. And the third one is the adidaivic pain, which is due to the supernatural causes, for example, the pain inflicted to us by the cause of ghost or demon. The state in which one suffers is the bondage state. So whenever you're feeling kind of like inflicted by suffering, it is because you are in a bondage state according to the Sankhya philosophy. The ultimate aim of life is to get rid of these sufferings through acquiring the highest knowledge. So only by acquiring the highest knowledge you could get rid of the suffering which was inflicted upon you, and this should be the ultimate aim of life. The state at which one rises above pain and pleasure is called liberated state. So in the liberated state, there is uh, it is where you transcend this wall of pain and pleasures. Purush is beyond space and time, conscious and enlightened. In reality, it is beyond bondage and associated suffering. So Purush, being beyond space and time and a conscious entity, is beyond the bondage and associated sufferings with it. However, Purush mistakenly believes itself as ego or mind, which is an evolute of Prakriti. So it is because of the mistaken belief of Purusha that it is the ego or mind that it gets inflicted or it gets into the cycle of suffering. However, Purusha should differentiate that ego or mind is the evolute of Prakriti, and everything in this world is an evolute of Prakriti except Purusha. It wrongly assumes itself to be the subject matter of suffering and apparently falls in bondage. So, because of the wrong belief of Purusha that it is the subject matter of suffering, it falls into the bondage, which is an apparent one. So, it is an illusory bondage it falls into. It falls into an illusory pit of bondage. It is ego which is actually bound and not the Purusha. So Purush is boundless, it is beyond space and time, it is conscious, it is enlightened, but it just forgets all of it. It just associates itself with the subject matter of suffering, and it considers itself as the subject matter of suffering, because of which it inflicts bondage upon itself, and this bondage is an illusory one or an apparent bondage. It should understand that it is ego which is actually bound and not the Purush. Bondage is due to the identification of non self as the self. So, non self as the self. Liberation can be attained only through acquiring discriminatory knowledge or Vivek Gyan. So you can only achieve liberation when you acquire discriminatory knowledge or Vivek Gyan, in which Purush discriminates itself from the evolutes of Prakriti, which are the ego, body, mind, etc. So you can only get liberated or you can only transcend pain and pleasure when you acquire the when Purush actually acquires the discriminatory knowledge or Vivek Gyan, in which it now knows that it is different from the evolutes of Prakriti, it is different from ego, from body, from mind, etc. Sankhya system denies the possibility of liberation through karma marg. So for Sankhya, you can only acquire liberation when you have the right knowledge or when you acquire the discriminatory knowledge or Viveka Gyan. That is the only route which would lead you to liberation and not Karma Marg. So it basically denies the possibility of liberation through Karma Marg and gives more uh, emphasis on following the uh, Viveka Gyan Marg. In Sankhya, liberation is negatively defined as the absolute cessation of pain and not as the state of positive bliss. So there are two kinds of liberation. Basically, there are two concepts associated with it. First is the negatively defined, and next is the positively defined. So in the negatively defined, there is just absolute cessation of pain and there's no state of positive bliss. So this is kind of non-incentivizing people for pursuing liberation. However, in the positively defined sense, it is said that there is the cessation of pain and following that there is a state of positive bliss, which basically incentivizes people who are trying to pursue liberation. Both Jivan Mukti and Vidhi Mukti are accepted in Sankhya. So Jivan Mukti is basically liberation while you're still living. So you have liberated, have transcended from the sufferings of this world, from pain and pleasure. However, you are still in your bodily form in this world, and while living, you have attained liberation. However, Videha Mukti is when there is ultimate liberation after death. So you have also transcended the cycle of birth and death. That is called as Videha Mukti. And both of these concepts, Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti, are accepted in Sankhya. However, in Sankhya, there is no transmigration of soul. They don't accept in the science migration of soul. They accept in they accept in Purush Bahutva or Bahu Purushvat. So these terms are kind of confusing, so I just kind of stutter in pronouncing all those words. But never mind. Uh, these are Purush Bahutva or Bahu Purushvat, which is accepted by Sankhya. They don't accept the transmigration of soul. Next is the criticism. So obviously every point has some criticism associated with it. The first point is Purush can never fall in bondage. However, we have read here that in reality it is beyond bondage and associated sufferings. So Purush can never fall in bondage since by definition it is beyond the suffering of the empirical world. So this is what we defined Purush in the first place. It is inert, it is conscious entity, it is beyond pain and pleasure, it is beyond bondage. Right. So, once it falls in bondage, Purush by nature being inert will never make an attempt to get liberated. So Purush is not changing. Purush is not trying to change or there is no flux in the state of Purush. So if even if Purush falls into the bondage, it will not try to make any attempt to get out of it or any attempt to get liberated and will be in a perpetual state of bondage. So you cannot get liberated according to the definition which was given to Purush, that it can never fall in bondage, and since by its definition it is beyond suffering and empirical world. But once it falls into bondage, Purush by nature being inert will never make an attempt to get liberated and will be in a perpetual state of bondage. So this is the first criticism, that if Purush falls into bondage, even since it is inert, it will never make an attempt to get liberated and it will be in a perpetual stage of bondage and will not get liberated. This is the first criticism. However, the next criticism is that Ishwar Krishna says that It is the unconscious ego which is subjected to pain, pleasure, and cycles of birth and death. From a commonsensical perspective, it is self contradictory to say that an unconscious being is subjected to pain and pleasure. So, we've read earlier that Prakriti is unconscious and everything in this world is just an evolute of Prakriti except the Purusha. So, our body, mind, ego, cycles of birth and death, sorry, our body, mind, ego, all of this are just the evolutes of Prakriti and so they are unconscious. So, the unconscious ego is the subject matter for pain, pleasure, and the cycles of birth and death. However, when we say that when Ishwar Krishna says that it's the unconscious ego which is subjected to pain and pleasure and the cycles of birth and death, it is self contradictory because an unconscious being cannot be subjected to pain and pleasure. It is a self contradictory statement that we are subjecting an unconscious being to pain and pleasure. How would it know that it is being subjected to all of it? It is unconscious, right? In the contrast systems, in contrast to systems like Jainism, Nyaya, and Mimamsa, except soul, which is the conscious entity as the subject matter of pain and pleasure. So, Samkhya systems consider unconscious ego as the subject matter of pain and pleasure and the cycles of birth and death. However, the contrasting systems of Jainism, Nyaya, and Mimamsa accept the concept of soul which is a conscious entity and it is a subject matter of pain and pleasure. So, in Jainism, Nyaya, and Mimamsa, soul is a subject matter of pain and pleasure. However, in Sankhya, unconscious ego is subjected to pain and pleasure. The next statement is that Sankhya believes bliss is a product of sattvic guna, thus defines liberation negatively as a state of the end of sufferings. So Sankhya believes that the positive bliss is a product of the sattvic guna and therefore defines liberation negatively in the sense that it is just a cessation of the sufferings or the end of sufferings. Philosophers like Shankaracharya believe liberation is the end of the empirical pain and pleasure and the realization of the transcendental bliss. So it is not the realization of bliss in this world, it is the realization of the transcendental bliss, which is not a product of Prakriti. Also, defining liberation in a negative way disincentivizes an aspirant from pursuing it. So, as I told you earlier, that like for example, if I denote that it's just that you would clear the examination, you would be free from cycle of this perpetual civil services examination, but there won't be any benefits given to you. It's just that you just clear the examination, there is no service allocation. What would it matter? This would disincentivize you that why would I actually work upon things or why what is the motivation? So this negative concept is trying to be contrasted by the positive concept of liberation in which there is a realization of transcendental bliss along with the end of the empirical pain and pleasure. So this transcendental bliss is not a product of Prakriti, it is beyond Prakriti. The fourth argument is that later commentators of Sankhya like Vijnana Bhikshu and Vedantins like Ramanujacharya disregard the idea of Jivan Mukti. So they have disregarded the idea of Jivan Mukti that you could achieve liberation while on this while living or while on this empirical world. So they disregard this idea. Since in an embodied state, one will be subjected to bodily and mental changes. So there will be bodily and mental changes, this is true. And since you're subjected to bodily and mental changes, you cannot actually achieve that kind of liberation, that state of the cessation of suffering, because you are now subjected to the uh, first kind of pain, which is the adhyatmic pain, which was due to the bodily disorders. So you are still subjected to the bodily and mental changes, which is the adhyatmic changes. The pain is still there while you are alive. So Jivan Mukti is disregarded by later Sankhyans like Vigyan Bhikshu and Vedantins like Ramanujacharya. They believe liberation is possible only after death. So only Vidya Mukti is the state of ultimate liberation. So in Jivan Mukti, even though you're free from desires, but you have to anyhow deal with the bodily or mental changes, right? So that is why they disregard Jivan Mukti. So, what was Sankhyans' view on God? So, Sankhya view of God, they basically do not accept God. They were atheistic in nature. In essence, this was the general idea of the Sankhyan philosophy. Even though Sankhya system doesn't dispute the existence of God, it repudiates theism. So they just reject theism on the following grounds. The first is God is neither perceived nor inferred. So you cannot perceive him, nor you could logically or rationally deduce him. You cannot infer him. Passages which are apparently theistic in Vedas are nothing but eulogies of free souls endowed with some special power. So, in passages where there are apparently theistic mentions in the Vedas, these are just eulogies of free souls who were endowed with some special kind of powers. The second argument given by Samkhya is that the world must have a cause. God is eternal and immutable. Creation means activity, and hence God can't be the efficient cause of this world. So the world must have a cause. God is eternal and immutable. So this is the first statement. Next is that creation means activity. So there is some kind of activity involved in creation, and hence God can't be the efficient cause of this world because He is eternal and immutable. Also, He has to depend upon the matter for creation, which contradicts the omnipotence of God. So, if God has to depend upon the matter for creation, this basically contradicts the omnipotency of God. Next is the law of karma. Law of karma is automatically operating law. If it's controlled by God, there is no need for the law of karma. So all of karma is just operating automatically. It is because of like you did something wrong, then you pay for it. You said did something good, you reaped good fruits. This is just an automatically operating law. If God was the one who's controlling it, then there is no need for the law of karma because he would then and there inflict or he would then and there pass the judgments according to your karmas or according to your deeds. There would not be a cycle of the karmic cycle or the cycle of birth and death and so on. So the conclusion or importance or significance basically. First is the Sankhyan's thesis of origin of the world from the subtle Prakriti has some striking similarities with the theories of origin of the world endorsed by the modern sciences. So this is similar with the modern science concept of the theory of theories of the origin of the world. For example, the Darwin's theory of evolution, where atom is considered as a substance, uh, survival of the fittest. Thinkers like Dr. S. Radhakrishnan are of the view that Samkhya system rises above the pluralistic philosophers like Jainas and Vaisheshikas by treating all material elements as evolutes of the single Prakriti. So, according to Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, who was also the president of India, was of the view that Sankhya system rises above the pluralistic philosophies like Jaina and Vaisheshika by treating all material elements as evolutes of the single Prakriti. So everything in this world except Purusha is the evolute of Prakriti. So this basically differentiates it from the other pluralistic philosophical systems like Jain and Vaisheshika. Second is that Bhagavad Gita borrows to a large extent the concept of soul, the idea of three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, from Samkhya to explain the law of karma, bondage, and liberation. So, a major chunk or major extent of the concept of soul, the ideas of three gunas from Samkhya were taken in Bhagavad Gita in order to explain the law of karma, bondage, and liberation. So, I hope you would have been with me for this entire video, and thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, see ya. Bye.